Biden says this is a decisive decade for our world at UN General Assembly. CNN. President Joe Biden on Tuesday delivered his first speech since taking office to the United Nations General Assembly, and said this is a decisive decade for our world, that will determine the global community's future. As a global community, we're challenged by urgent and looming crises wherein lie enormous opportunities if we can summon the will and resolve to seize these opportunities, Biden said. Biden's appearance at the Assembly in New York comes as he continues to deal with a number of foreign policy crises, including blowback from the French over a recent deal to give Australia nuclear-powered submarines, the chaotic U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan and a bungled U.S. drone strike in Kabul that killed Afghan civilians. Biden's speech, which will come in the morning session, will center on the proposition that we are closing the chapter on 20 years of war and opening a chapter of intensive diplomacy by rallying allies and partners and institutions to deal with the major challenges of our time, a senior administration official said. The president will essentially drive home the message that ending the war in Afghanistan closed the chapter focused on war and opened a chapter focused on purposeful, effective, intensive American diplomacy, the official added. The official listed COVID-19, climate change, emerging technologies, trade and economics, investments in clean infrastructure and counterterrorism as areas toward which the president intends to direct the world's attention, a prospect made easier by ending prolonged military conflicts. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki also said on Monday that Biden, during his remarks, will lay out the case for why the next decade will determine our future, not just for the United States, but for the global community. And he will talk, and this will be a central part of his remarks, about the importance of re-establishing our alliances over the last several years. Psaki suggested part of the speech would delve into how the U.S. will refocus its global priorities, telling reporters that Biden will talk about his objective of turning our focus and our resources to the priorities in regions of the world that are most consequential, pressed on how the president would re-establish credibility on the national stage as he continues to deal with a number of foreign policy crises. Psaki asserted that criticism of a decision is different from criticism of the credibility in leadership of the United States, broadly speaking. We are committed to those alliances, and that always requires work from every president, from every global leader, and his commitment is to make sure we are directing our energy, our resources and our efforts on the biggest challenges we're facing in the world, she said. According to the senior administration official, Biden will also emphasize vigorous competition with great powers but not a new Cold War, a broad strokes description of his approach to China, but he'll also underscore that the U.S. isn't seeking conflict with China. President Biden will communicate tomorrow that he does not believe in the notion of a new Cold War with the world divided into blocs. He believes in vigorous, intensive, principled competition that does not tip over into conflict, the official said. As has been tradition, the United States, represented by Biden, will be the second nation to speak on the General Assembly floor Tuesday morning. Biden will follow Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro, who is defying rules requiring a COVID-19 vaccination to be in the Assembly Hall. After Biden arrived in New York City for the UNGA Monday afternoon, he met with UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. On Tuesday he'll meet with Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Then in Washington, Biden is slated to participate in bilateral meetings with UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Japanese Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide. On Wednesday, he'll convene a virtual COVID-19 summit on the margins of UNGA, and on Friday he'll host the first ever in-person meeting with the Quad Collective at the White House. a group which consists of Japan, Australia, India and the United States. This is a breaking story and will be updated. CNN's Kevin Liptick contributed to this report. Evacuation flights out of Kabul picking up. Here's what it's like at the airport. Washington, CNN. The Biden administration's evacuation efforts in Afghanistan have gained considerable momentum in recent days, now far exceeding the initial daily goals after a chaotic and disjointed start. The White House said Wednesday morning that approximately 19,000 people had been evacuated by U.S. military and coalition flights over the past 24 hours. The Pentagon said Tuesday that there are, a little bit above 5,000 people at the airport in Kabul waiting to board flights, which are now leaving about every 45 minutes. Additionally, two defense officials told CNN on Tuesday that the first U.S. troops have started leaving the country as the evacuation effort enters its final week. That's an improvement on all fronts. But the U.S. is still up against the clock. President Joe Biden will stick, for now, with the August 31 deadline to withdraw U.S. troops, according to a senior administration official. For help understanding the situation on the ground, the What Matters newsletter turned to CNN senior international correspondent Sam Kiley, who is at Kabul's Hamid Karzai International Airport while the evacuation efforts unfold. Our conversation, conducted over the phone and lightly edited for flow, is below. What matters? You got into Afghanistan on Sunday. What was your impression when you first got on the ground? SK. We arrived mid-afternoon on a Qatari flight and I was pleased and relieved to see quite large, well-ordered queues of people already being loaded onto aircraft from around the world. So the kind of awful scenes that Clarissa Ward had witnessed on her way out in the very early stages of the evacuation were not being repeated by the time I got in. But there were very large numbers and there were also, of course, very large numbers of people pressed up against the walls outside, and indeed on that day, although we didn't know it at the time exactly, but on that day, 7 people were killed in crushes against the walls. A lot of them close to the British military camp. What matters? The U.S. evacuation effort has obviously ramped up in recent days. Are you seeing planes constantly coming in and out of the Kabul airport? SK. Yeah. So there is a constant circulation of aircraft. Mostly big cargo lifts, C-17s and these propeller planes or kind of NATO aircraft. There's a small number of civilian aircraft. I've seen Cam Air, which is an Afghan airline that took several hundred people off. I watched that takeoff this afternoon. So there most certainly has been a very significant increase. And that's borne out by the statistics, which show, according to the United States, that 21,000 were evacuated over a 24-hour period. That's both U.S. and coalition evacuees. Americans evacuated about 12,000 of them. Today, by lunchtime the Americans had evacuated about 9,000. The numbers of people waiting to be evacuated seem to be sitting between 4,000 and 5,000 as small numbers of people are now able to get in. But everything is much, much more slickly organized. And there's no great surprise, people should get better at what they do. And nobody's had any practice in this kind of an operation. So that it was chaotic to begin with and now is pretty slick is no great surprise. It doesn't solve many of the problems outside of the gate. But it does mean that you don't get the massive bottlenecks that we saw at the beginning. What matters? The people you're seeing who are actually reaching the airfield, are they relieved? Are they just anxious for the flight to actually take off? What's their state of mind? SK. It's very clear almost every person is very, very badly torn by the need to get out and save themselves and their families, in their view, and their friends and families in the country that they're leaving behind. I spoke to, on the day I arrived, a fellow journalist who had to get out in 2016 because he'd been threatened by the Taliban but was able to come back and work in Kabul with a bit of a lower profile. He felt he had to get out. He said that he was heartbroken and actually it was a very, very moving encounter. I don't often. I try to control myself on air because I'm a professional. But there was something about a member of my tribe being heartbroken and being it was a real kind of emotional gut punch to see the look in his eyes when he was leaving. And that is a look that I've seen in the eyes of lots of people. And just today, I spoke to a young woman, mostly through a translator, who was getting out but who had got separated from her brother, who was also hoping to get out but he'd got stuck on the wrong side of the gate. And she was moments away from getting on an aircraft and didn't appear to know where she was going to end up. And she had with her her two younger sisters, one of whom was probably about 9. And she was in tears over the fact that she was going to leave her brother behind, but went ahead with the evacuation because she felt she had no choice. What matters? Do the people that you've talked to have an idea where they're going, or is the focus on just getting out of Afghanistan? Well, the focus for people getting out is to get out. But by and large, they have the paperwork to get out because of their association with one or other of the coalition partners. If you've got an American visa, you know that you're going to end up in America. If you've got a visa for Holland, that's where you'll go. So those are the ones who have the very close association. Probably military and diplomatic and intelligence and so on. Then you have the people who are sort of vulnerable because they're journalists or artists or activists or members of the intelligentsia who fear that the Taliban life will be dangerous for them. Qatar has put a lot of effort into bringing them to Qatar. Where they then go on to, they're not always aware. They often express a preference for Europe, Canada, the United States. And I think that will be quite a challenge for different countries to step up to the mark, particularly those countries that invested in this 20-year war. To figure out where their moral and social responsibilities lie in looking after these people who were encouraged to buy into the idea of a modernizing Afghan state rather than a medieval one. What matters? Finally, since arriving on Sunday, what has surprised you the most? Well, it's pretty difficult to surprise me. I've been doing this job 30 years. In all honesty, I think what has personally been, I've been surprised by how very moved I've been and very sad. I first came to Afghanistan just before the battle for Tora Bora, when Al-Qaeda was driven out. And now I'm watching the coalition being driven out and replaced by the Taliban, and the heartbreak of the shattering of people's hopes over the last 20 years and the kind of fear they have for their future is very difficult to witness. On a practical level, it is an extraordinary thing to witness, an airlift, an emergency air evacuation, which is the second biggest the world has ever seen, second to the Indian evacuation of their citizens from Kuwait after Saddam Hussein invaded there. The numbers are astronomical. The other really striking thing has been the extreme loyalty that a lot of these people, not only in the military, but intelligence and in diplomacy and so on, feel toward their friends and colleagues with whom they worked inside Afghanistan. There are lots of people working very, very hard behind the scenes, both overtly and covertly, to get their former colleagues and friends out. And that has been heartening, actually. It's also been quite moving because it means that these were genuine relationships and friendships that even though the nations that were in the coalition are now abandoning Afghanistan, the human bonds that exist between the peoples in those nations remain very strong. COVID vaccine much safer than catching the virus. Study in Israel finds, CNN, a large study involving close to 2 million people in Israel shows the Pfizer-BioNTech coronavirus vaccine slightly raises the risk of heart inflammation, swollen lymph nodes and shingles. But it also finds that COVID-19 infection raises the risk of heart inflammation even more, plus it raises the risk of blood clots, heart attacks and other deadly events. It's the first large study to compare the risks of vaccination versus infection head-to-head in the same population during the same time. And it shows the risks of infection far outweigh any risks from the vaccine, the researcher said. In this study in a nationwide mass vaccination setting, the BNT162b2 vaccine was not associated with an elevated risk of most of the adverse events examined. Drive. Ran Balaker of the Clalit Research Institute in Tel Aviv and colleagues wrote in their report, published in the New England Journal of Medicine. They did find extra cases of myocarditis, a type of heart inflammation that's been linked with both of the mRNA vaccines made by Moderna and Pfizer. It added up to about 3 extra cases per 100,000 people vaccinated, and was seen almost entirely among young men. The main potential adverse events identified included an excess risk of lymphadenopathy, swelling of the lymph glands, herpes zoster infection, shingles, appendicitis, and myocarditis, they wrote. To place these risks in context, we also examined data on more than 240,000 infected persons to estimate the effects of a documented SARS-CoV-2 infection on the incidence of the same adverse events, they added. SARS-CoV-2 infection was not estimated to have a meaningful effect on the incidence of lymphadenopathy, herpes zoster infection, or appendicitis. But it was estimated to result in a substantial excess risk of myocarditis. COVID-19 infection raised the risk of myocarditis by much more than vaccination did, about 11 cases per 100,000 people vaccinated. They also found some surprises. Some initially unexpected effects were seen in the results of the current study. The BNT162b2 vaccine appears to be protective against certain conditions such as anemia and intracranial hemorrhage, they wrote. These same adverse events are also identified in this study as complications of SARS-CoV-2 infection. So it appears likely that the protective effect of the vaccine is mediated through its protection against undiagnosed SARS-CoV-2 infection, they added. Dr. Grace Lee, a pediatrician at Stanford University who chairs the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, said the findings provide valuable insight. Messenger RNA, mRNA, vaccines may be associated with myocarditis, but they can also prevent cases of myocarditis, acute kidney injury, arrhythmia, and thromboembolic disease. Lee, who was not involved in the study, wrote in a commentary. The key to comparing these risks depends on the risk of SARS-CoV-2 infection to an individual person. And that risk can vary according to place and over time. Given the current state of the global pandemic, however, the risk of exposure to SARS-CoV-2 appears to be inevitable. Last June, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration added a warning about risk of myocarditis and a related inflammatory condition called pericarditis to information sheets for the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines. U.S. World War II veteran reunites with Italians he saved as children. Bologna, Italy, for more than 7 decades. Martin Adler treasured a black-and-white photo of himself as a young American soldier with a broad smile with 3 impeccably dressed Italian children he is credited with saving as the Nazis retreated northward in 1944. On Monday, the 97-year-old World War II veteran met the 3 siblings, now octogenarians themselves, in person for the first time since the war. Adler held out his hand to grasp those of Bruno, Mifalda and Giuliana Naldi for the joyful reunion at Bologna's airport after a 20-hour journey from Boca Raton, Florida. Then, just as he did as a 20-year-old soldier in their village of Monterenzio, He handed out bars of American chocolate. "Look at my smile," Adler said of the long-awaited in-person reunion, made possible by the reach of social media. "It was a happy ending to a story that could easily have been a tragedy." The very first time the soldier and the children saw each other, in 1944. The three faces peeked out of a huge wicker basket where their mother had hidden them as soldiers approached. Adler thought the house was empty. So he trained his machine gun on the basket when he heard a sound, thinking a German soldier was hiding inside. "The mother, Mama, came out and stood right in front of my gun to stop me from shooting," Adler recalled. "She put her stomach right against my gun, yelling, 'Bambinis! Bambinis! Bambinis!' pounding my chest," Adler recalled. "That was a real hero, the mother, not me. The mother was a real hero. Can you imagine you standing yourself in front of a gun and screaming, 'Children?'" "No," he said. Adler still trembles when he remembers that he was only seconds away from opening fire on the basket. And after all these decades, he still suffers nightmares from the war. Said his daughter, Rochelle Donnelly. The children, aged 3 to 6 when they met, were a happy memory. His company stayed on in the village for a while and he would come by and play with them. Juliana Naldi, the youngest, is the only one of the three with any recollection of the event. She recalls climbing out of the basket and seeing Adler and another U.S. soldier, who has since died. "They were laughing," Naldi, now 80, remembers. "They were happy they didn't shoot." She, on the other hand, didn't quite comprehend the close call. "We weren't afraid for anything," she said. She also remembers the soldier's chocolate, which came in a blue and white wrapper. "We ate so much of that chocolate," she laughed. Donnelly decided during the COVID-19 lockdown to use social media to try to track down the children in the old black and white photo, starting with veterans groups in North America. Eventually the photo was spotted by Italian journalist Matteo Incerti, who had written books on World War II. He was able to track down Adler's regiment and where it had been stationed from a small detail in another photograph. The smiling photo was then published in a local newspaper, leading to the discovery of the identities of the three children, who by then were grandparents themselves. They shared a video reunion in December, and waited until the easing of pandemic travel rules made the transatlantic trip possible. "I am so happy and so proud of him. Because things could have been so different in just a second. Because he hesitated, there have been generations of people," Donnelly said. The serendipity isn't lost on Juliana Naldi's 30-year-old granddaughter, Roberta Fontana, one of 6 children. 8 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren who descended from the 3 children hidden in the wicker basket. "Knowing that Martin could have shot and that none of my family would exist is something very big," Fontana said. "It is very emotional." During his stay in Italy, Adler will spend some time in the village where he was stationed, before traveling on to Florence, Naples and Rome, where he hopes to meet Pope Francis. "My dad really wants to meet the Pope," Donnelly said. "He wants to share his message of peace and love. My dad is all about peace." Fastest orbiting asteroid found in our solar system, CNN. A newly discovered asteroid is sticking close to our Sun, much closer than our own planet Earth. The asteroid, called 2021 PH27, completes an orbit around the Sun every 113 days and comes within 12.4 million miles, 20 million kilometers, of our star. That gives this space rock the distinction of having the shortest known orbital period for an asteroid, and only the second shortest orbit around the Sun after Mercury, which takes 88 days to complete its orbital journey around our star. Scott Shepard, an astronomer at the Carnegie Institution for Science, discovered the asteroid in twilight observations made by Brown University astronomers Ian Dell'Antonio and Shenming Fu on August 13. Dell'Antonio, a professor of physics, and Fu, a doctoral student, took the images using the dark energy camera mounted on the Victor M. Blanco 4-meter telescope at Cerro Tololo Inter-American Observatory in Chile. Multiple aspects of the asteroid surprised Shepard. The asteroid is 0.6 miles, 1 kilometer, in size, and very few asteroids this size in the inner solar system likely exist that are unknown, he said. 2021 PH27 gets so close to the Sun that its surface can reach temperatures of 900 degrees Fahrenheit, 482 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt lead, said Shepard via email. Because of these extreme temperatures, it is unlikely 2021 PH27 is composed of any volatile material. And it is most likely made up of rock with maybe some metal like iron. It has an unstable orbit that crosses the orbits of Mercury and Venus as they make their way around the Sun. Within a few million years, the asteroid's orbit will likely cause its doom. The rocky fragment could collide with Mercury or Venus, or the Sun itself, or be knocked out of its current position in the Solar System. This diagram shows the orbits of the newly discovered asteroid, orange, as well as Earth, blue, Mercury, white, and Venus, yellow, around the Sun. The asteroid is so near the Sun's massive gravitational field of the Sun that it experiences effects on its orbit. Shepard said. The newfound asteroid is only one of about 20 Atira asteroids, which are those asteroids that are completely interior to Earth's orbit of the Sun. While there are a few known asteroids that come nearly as close to the Sun as 2021 PH27, they have much longer orbits. Some of these asteroids have been seen to have dust in their orbits, suggesting the asteroids are slowly fragmenting or cracking apart from the extreme thermal stresses on these objects, Shepard said. One notable example of this is Phaethon, the comet-like asteroid that creates the Geminid meteor showers that occur in our skies every December. Tracking down an asteroid, but where did this space rock come from? That's one of the questions Shepard wants to investigate next, but he has some ideas based on the preliminary observations. It's likely that the asteroid became dislodged from the main asteroid belt located between Mars and Jupiter, but Shepard hasn't ruled out the possibility that 2021 PH27 is actually an extinct comet. It could be an extinct comet, as comets are known to come from the outer solar system on elongated, long-period orbits and gravitationally interact with the inner planets to get more circular shorter-period orbits that keep them in the inner solar system for long periods of time, Shepard explained. The inner planets include Mercury, Venus, Earth and Mars. When this happens, some of the comet's elements will evaporate until it no longer looks like a comet. Instead, it's just the leftover remnants. New Space Telescope could spot potentially hazardous asteroids heading for Earth. New Space Telescope could spot potentially hazardous asteroids heading for Earth. Shepard typically searches for incredibly distant objects in the Solar System and beyond. However, it's also crucial to understand the population of asteroids close to Earth's orbit. Near-Earth asteroids have a chance of impacting Earth in the future, but some of them are incredibly difficult to observe because they approach our planet during the daytime. The space interior to Earth's orbit has been relatively unexplored to date, Shepard said. It is hard to observe the region towards the Sun because of the Sun's extreme glare. But the dark energy camera has a large field of view, making it a powerful tool to search for otherwise elusive objects like 2021 PH27, especially during the twilight hours as the Sun sets and just before it rises. After Shepard's discovery, Astronomer David Thalin at the University of Hawaii measured the asteroid's position and predicted where it could be observed the next night. This enabled multiple telescopes to observe the asteroid from Chile and South Africa on August 14 and 15. These astronomers postponed observations for their own research to assist with learning more about the asteroid. Although telescope time is very precious, the international nature and love of the unknown makes astronomers very willing to override their own science and observations to follow up new interesting discoveries like this, Shepard said. We are so grateful for all of our collaborators who enabled us to act quickly on this discovery. Soon, the asteroid will pass behind the Sun and won't be observable until early 2022. Shepard is eager to learn more about the asteroid's composition and its origin. Where are these inner asteroids coming from? Some are recently dislodged main belt asteroids. Other might be extinct comets, but there could be another source population, such as the volcanoids, which are a hypothetical population of asteroids, Shepard said. Body consistent with description, of Gabby Petrato found in Bridger Teton National Forest. A body consistent with the description of Gabby Petrato. The 22-year-old woman who went missing while on a cross-country road trip with her boyfriend, was discovered in the Bridger Teton National Forest in Wyoming. The FBI Denver. The National Park Service and law enforcement made the announcement during a news conference Sunday evening in Grand Teton National Park. Charles Jones, the FBI's supervisory senior resident agent, said that a full forensic identification hasn't yet been completed, but investigators did notify Petrato's parents. A cause of death was also undetermined. Jones declined to comment further on the investigation. We continue to seek information from anyone who utilized the Spread Creek dispersed camping area between the dates of August 27 and August 30. Anyone that may have had contact with Gabby, or her boyfriend, or who may have seen their vehicle in that area, please share any new information with the FBI, Jones said. More. Police resume search for Brian Laundrie, boyfriend of missing 22-year-old Gabby Petrato. An attorney for the Petrato family released a statement Sunday evening asking for privacy to grieve and also thanking the agencies that assisted in the search. Your tireless work and determination helped bring Gabby home to her parents, the statement said. The family and I will be forever grateful. Northport Police tweeted that it will be working with the FBI in its investigation. Our focus from the start, along with the FBI, and national partners, has been to bring her home, the department tweeted. The Teton County coroner confirmed to ABC News on Sunday afternoon that the agency dispatched resources to a body found in the National Forest. No further details were disclosed. The development came as a search for Brian Laundrie, Petrato's boyfriend, resumed in Florida. Petrato's parents reported her missing on Sept. 11 after not speaking with her for 2 weeks. Laundrie had been named by police as a person of interest in Petrato's disappearance. The 23-year-old Laundrie, who returned home more than 2 weeks ago without Petrato and has refused to speak to police, has not been seen since Tuesday, according to law enforcement officials. The Laundrie family attorney said in a statement Sunday evening, "The news about Gabby Petrato is heartbreaking. The Laundrie family prays for Gabby and her family." Gabby Petrato's family attorney says fiance Brian Laundrie is not missing, he is hiding, CNN, along with the search for missing 22-year-old Gabby Petrato. Local and federal authorities in Florida are looking for Petrato's fiancé Brian Laundrie after his family told police they haven't seen him since Tuesday. The FBI is involved in the investigation and search for the 23-year-old Laundrie. Police in Northport said late Friday in a statement that expressed frustration that his family did not speak with investigators for nearly a week about Petratos' disappearance. "We understand the community's frustration. We are frustrated too." For 6 days, the Northport Police Department and the FBI have been pleading with the family to contact investigators regarding Brian's fiancée Gabby Petrato. Friday is the first time they have spoken with investigators in detail, the statement said. "We've been trying all week to talk to his family, to talk to Brian. And now they've called us here on Friday. We've gone to the home. And they're saying now they have not seen their son," Northport police spokesperson Josh Taylor told CNN's Chris Cuomo on Friday night. "So we are working through those details as we speak." It is another twist in this story. Law enforcement began investigating the disappearance of Petrato after her family reported her missing on September 11 after they were unable to contact her for several days. Prior to her disappearance, Petrato had been traveling with Laundrie on a road trip through several western states, CNN reported. Laundrie returned to Northport without Petrato on September 1. According to police, officials later found the van that the couple had been traveling in at the home Petrato shared with Laundrie and his parents in Northport. Police previously had visited the home but the family refused to talk and instead gave authorities the information for their attorney. Taylor said earlier this week. Friday's statement noted that Laundrie is not wanted for a crime, and law enforcement are now working multiple missing person investigations. In a statement Friday night to CNN, Laundrie family attorney Stephen Bertolino said Brian's whereabouts are currently unknown. Richard Stafford, the attorney for the Petrato family, said in a brief statement sent to CNN, "All of Gabby's family want the world to know that Brian is not missing, he is hiding. Gabby is missing." Petrato's stepfather. "I don't know what to believe," Petrato's stepfather said on Friday that he's happy Laundrie's parents called police, but said, "I don't know what to believe." Jim Schmidt told CNN's Cuomo he was caught off guard by the news shared moments earlier that Laundrie's family spoke with authorities, saying he hadn't even had a moment to digest it. "All that matters is finding her and bringing her home," Schmidt said. "We're still trying to get the word out there and try to find that one person that might have some details that we need," Schmidt said. "Just trying to get out there and find that person and hopefully they can help us with anything that will bring her home." When asked if there was anything from the last few times he contacted Gabby that would be helpful now, Schmidt said, "I'm not sure. We've been analyzing everything as much as we can. And your mind races in a million different directions when you're trying to put something like this together and we're still trying to get a full grasp on the entire situation." Schmidt asked for media members to just keep getting the word out, adding, "Some different photos, not just the ones that have been out there. Maybe that sparks something in the public that somebody didn't recognize before and just keep getting that word out there and keep this fresh in the media so it keeps going until we find her." The FBI has released a new missing person poster asking for help in the search for Petrato. Campsite reviews appear to show the couple this summer before their disappearance. Petrato and Laundrie appeared to have left reviews on an online camp community app called The Dirt. An account linked to the couple lists campgrounds in Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Washington, Wyoming, and Utah, as well as left reviews of campsites where Petrato was last seen. Camping spots to the Grand Teton National Park were saved on the profile. According to a timeline of events provided Friday by Petrato family attorney Stafford, Gabby FaceTimed with her mother on August 24, saying she was leaving Utah and headed to the Tetons. A photo of the couple was posted on The Dirt 2 months ago and tags their social media accounts. Their most recent review is about Arches National Park in Utah in July. in the same county where Moab police had an interaction with Petrato and Laundrie 2 weeks later. At the time, officers with the Moab City Police Department responded to reports of disorderly conduct involving Petrato and Laundrie, which ended with a report describing them as having engaged in some sort of altercation. The officers who responded to the incident suggested that Laundrie and Petrato should separate for the night, according to the report, and no charges were filed. One of the officers who responded to the scene wrote in the police report that Laundrie said the pair had been traveling together for the last 4 or 5 months. CNN's Paul P. Murphy, Kayleen Chassie, Christina Maxoris, Aya Elamrusi, Andy Rose, Mi Son Lee and Deanna Hackney contributed to this report. NCIENT DNA from a teen girl reveals previously unknown group of humans, CNN. The bones of a teenage hunter-gatherer who died more than 7,000 years ago on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi tell the story of a previously unknown group of humans. This distinct human lineage has never been found anywhere else in the world, according to new research. The study published Wednesday in the journal Nature. We have discovered the first ancient human DNA in the island region between Asia and Australia, known as Wallacea, providing new insight into the genetic diversity and population history of early modern humans in this little understood part of the world, said study co-author Adam Brum, a professor of archaeology at Griffith University's Australian Research Centre for Human Evolution, via email. The first modern humans used the Wallacea Islands, mainly Indonesian islands that include Sulawesi, Lombok and Flores, as they crossed from Eurasia to the Australian continent more than 50,000 years ago, researchers believe. The exact route or how they navigated this crossing, however, is unknown. They must have done so using relatively sophisticated watercraft of some kind, as there were no land bridges between the islands, even during the glacial peaks of the last ice age, when global sea levels were up to 140 meters, 459 feet, lower than they are today, Brum said. Tools and cave paintings have suggested that humans were living on these islands by 47,000 years ago, but the fossil record is sparse and ancient DNA degrades more rapidly in the tropical climate. However, researchers uncovered the skeleton of a female between the ages of 17 and 18 in a cave on Sulawesi in 2015. Her remains were buried in the cave 7,200 years ago. She was part of the Tolian culture, only found in a pocket of Sulawesi's southwestern peninsula. The cave is part of an archaeological site called the Liang Panange. The Tolans is the name archaeologists have given to a rather enigmatic culture of prehistoric hunter-gatherers that lived in the forested plains and mountains of South Sulawesi between around 8,000 years ago until roughly the 5th century AD, said Brum via email. They made highly distinctive stone tools, including tiny, finely crafted arrowheads known as Maros points, that are not found anywhere else on the island or in wider Indonesia. The young hunter-gatherer is the first largely complete and well-preserved skeleton associated with the Tolian culture, Brum said. Lead study author Selina Karlhoff was able to retrieve DNA from the wedge-shaped petrous bone at the base of the skull. It was a major challenge, as the remains had been strongly degraded by the tropical climate, said Karlhoff, also a doctoral candidate at the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History in Jena, Germany. In a statement, "Secrets hiding in DNA. The work to retrieve the genetic information was well worth it." The young woman's DNA showed that she descended from the first wave of modern humans to enter Wallacea 50,000 years ago. This was part of the initial colonization of Greater Australia, or the combined Ice Age landmass of Australia and New Guinea. These are the ancestors of present-day Indigenous Australians and Papuans, Brum said. and it turns out that the oldest genome traced to the Wallacea Islands revealed something else. Previously unknown ancient humans. She also shares ancestry with a separate and distinct group from Asia who likely arrived after the colonization of Greater Australia. Because modern indigenous Australians and Papuans don't share ancestry with this group. Brum said. Previously, it was thought that the first time people with Asian genes entered Wallacea was around 3,500 years ago when Austronesian-speaking farmers from Neolithic Taiwan swept down through the Philippines and into Indonesia, he said. It suggests that there might have been a distinct group of modern humans in this region that we really had no idea about up until now. As archaeological sites are so scarce in Wallacea and ancient skeletal remains are rare, no descendants of this lineage remain. Her genome included another trace of an enigmatic and extinct group of humans, Denisovans. The handful of fossils signifying that these early humans ever existed are largely from Siberia and Tibet. The fact that their genes are found in the hunter-gatherers of Liang Panenge supports our earlier hypothesis that the Denisovans occupied a far larger geographical area than previously understood, said study co-author Johannes Krause, a professor of archaeogenetics at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig, Germany, in a statement. But when her DNA was compared with that of other hunter-gatherers who lived west of Wallacea at the same time, their DNA didn't contain any traces of Denisovan DNA. The geographic distribution of Denisovans and modern humans may have overlapped in the Wallacea region. It may well be the key place where Denisova people and the ancestors of indigenous Australians and Papuans interbred, said study co-author Cosimo Poth, a professor at the University of Tübingen's Senckenberg Center for Human Evolution and Paleoenvironment in Frankfurt, Germany, in a statement. Researchers don't know what happened to the Tolian culture, and this latest discovery is one piece of the puzzle as they try to understand the ancient genetic history of humans in Southeast Asia. Brum hopes that more ancient DNA from the Tolian people can be recovered to reveal its diversity, and its wider ancestral story. Trying to pull off an infinite number of miracles. Inside the round-the-clock volunteer effort to save Afghans. Washington, CNN, the woman and her 2 children had tried nearly a dozen times without success to get into Hamid Karzai International Airport for an evacuation flight out of Kabul to join her husband in the United States. This time, though, their connection inside the airport gates was able to make it happen. She dressed her baby daughter in yellow so she could be spotted in the chaotic crowds outside the Kabul airport. The Marines had been sent a photo of the baby in a WhatsApp group and knew to look for her colorful outfit. She held her daughter aloft as she made her way through the chaotic scrum outside, and the Marines used a flashlight to scan the crowd. They spotted her. The family made it in. My family would absolutely not have gotten through unless we got into contact with the Marines at the gates, said the father, whose identity CNN is concealing for his safety. He is a U.S. citizen, who worked for years with the U.S. in Afghanistan. The dangerous and chaotic scenes outside the airport have made it virtually impossible for Afghans, even those with green cards. Specific instructions from the U.S. Embassy, or ailing children, to make it onto airport grounds without a connection, inside the wire. Now, with the U.S. presence in Kabul quickly beginning to wind down Afghans and Americans, many of them military veterans, are tapping into their networks and working around the clock to arrange everything from access into the airport to charter flights to get Afghans vulnerable to Taliban retaliation out of Afghanistan. #Digital Dunkirk. Some are calling their efforts a #Digital Dunkirk, a nod to the World War II evacuation effort that commissioned civilian boats to save Allied troops. One of the umbrella efforts is titled, and others are calling it #AfghanEvac. At least one coalition has set up a joint command center out of a Washington, D.C., hotel to coordinate efforts. There is also a profound sense of frustration among the volunteers working to help their Afghan allies, as many of these individuals have been warning the administration for months about the need to have an evacuation plan in place. Throughout this insanity, the only hope any of us have are in the Americans now rising to the occasion to mount a #DigitalDunkirk. Matt Zeller, a veteran who works with the Association of Wartime Allies, wrote in a recent blog post, "My days are spent on constant phone calls and group chats, trying to figure out a way to move Family X to the airport, get past the ever-changing Taliban checkpoints, and somehow push through the scrum of humanity, all trying to reach the gate." Between those calls or coalition meetings with the disparate organizations and individuals all trying to pull off an infinite number of miracles at any given moment, the #AfghanEvac effort hosts phone calls twice daily with dozens of different organizations involved, and they have multiple groups chats conducted over the secretive messaging app Signal to connect people who are in touch with Afghans who need help to those who can try to find them the help that they need. The chat is also a place for brainstorming and sharing of best practices, such as tying balloons to children so that U.S. officials can easily identify them when they look for them from the gates. We started to bring everyone together under the #AfghanEvac moniker because everyone was doing a bunch of different, and often duplicative, stuff. We didn't need more groups. We needed to add capacity and streamline efforts so that everyone is working from the same sheet of music," said Sean Vandiver, who served in the Navy for 12 years and founded the San Diego chapter of the Truman National Security Project. "We needed to deconflict to make everyone's efforts more safe and efficient." Vandiver says that his ad hoc network is getting a lot of calls from Congress and even people in the executive branch, asking for help. There is no working structure in place by the U.S. government right now. It is the ad hoc effort that is producing real results, explained one Capitol Hill staffer. Volunteers and staff from various advocacy and veterans groups are working out of a hotel in the nation's capital to connect all the dots we're taking in, said Lexi Rock, the communications director for the Independence Fund. "I would say we probably have, at any given point, 20 to 25 people, the majority volunteering aside from their day job. They've been working around the clock and they haven't slept for hours, getting these charter flights and just connecting all the dots. So it's an impressive operation given that this is kind of uncharted territory for all of us," she said. The administration has evacuated 82,300 people on U.S. military and coalition flights since August 14, the White House said Wednesday morning. The State Department set up a task force to work on this, and they are also working closely with the Pentagon. Fears thousands will be left behind. However, Afghans bound for these flights still have to make the perilous journey to the airport, around Taliban checkpoints and through the crowds. Moreover, many of those involved say that the fact that their efforts are even needed point to a profound failure by the U.S. government, and they fear that the impending departure of U.S. troops could mean tens of thousands will be left behind. The very fact that you need several hundred people doing this around the clock of their own volition, with some even taking time off of work to do it, means that there is an absolute logistical failure on behalf of the U.S. government, said Eric Edstrom, a veteran who has been involved in the efforts. The Biden administration and the government as a whole should have seen this coming. They should have done capacity planning and properly forecasted what it would have taken to evacuate all Americans and Afghan allies. By location, he said. Secretary of State Antony Blinken recently defended the Biden administration's efforts on the Special Immigrant Visa (SIV) program in the lead-up to the fall of Kabul. but acknowledged that these were not the same as a full-on evacuation. A State Department spokesperson told CNN, "The United States government has no role in organizing private charter evacuation flights. The U.S. is not communicating through third parties related to HKIA access, nor does the USG endorse any third parties claiming to provide access to HKIA," they said. Adding that, all interested parties should visit their Afghanistan inquiries page and follow the instruction there. For many of the veterans involved in the effort, the work feels like a moral imperative. Our work will not make up for the failure of America's war in Afghanistan, but there is something redemptive and human about this mission. Alleviating suffering rather than causing it, Edstrom said. Some people in this group have cited that this is some of the finest work they have done in their lives. And doing this feels far more connected to helping people than did my on the ground when I was deployed as an infantry officer. This is so deeply personal for us because to those of us who served with the Afghans, lived among them, and were welcomed into their homes and culture by them, to us there is no us and them, there is only us, Zeller wrote. They are us. Leaving one of them behind is akin to leaving an American behind. COVID-19 vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds is safe and shows robust antibody response, Pfizer says, CNN, in a highly anticipated announcement. Pfizer said on Monday a Phase 2/3 trial showed its COVID-19 vaccine was safe and generated a robust antibody response in children ages 5 to 11. These are the first such results released for this age group for a U.S. COVID-19 vaccine, and the data has not yet been peer-reviewed or published. Pfizer said it plans to submit to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration for emergency use authorization soon. The trial included 2,268 participants ages 5 to 11 and used a 2-dose regimen of the vaccine administered 21 days apart. This trials used a 10 microgram dose, smaller than the 30 microgram dose that has been used for those 12 and older. The 10 microgram dose was carefully selected as the preferred dose for safety, tolerability and immunogenicity in children 5 to 11 years of age, Pfizer said in a news release. Participants' immune responses were measured by looking at neutralizing antibody levels in their blood and comparing those levels to a control group of 16 to 25-year-olds who were given a 2-dose regimen with the larger 30 microgram dose. Pfizer said the levels compared well with older people who received the larger dose, demonstrating a strong immune response in this cohort of children 1 month after the second dose. Further, the COVID-19 vaccine was well tolerated, with side effects generally comparable to those observed in participants 16 to 25 years of age, the company said. A Pfizer spokesperson also confirmed that were no instances of myocarditis, a type of heart inflammation that has been linked with mRNA vaccines. Pfizer said these data will be included in a near-term submission for EUA, and the companies will continue to accumulate the data needed to file for FDA approval for people ages 5 to 11. The Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine is currently approved for people age 16 and older, and authorized for use in people ages 12 to 15. Pfizer said it is expecting trial data for children as young as 6 months, as soon as the fourth quarter of this year. Since July, pediatric cases of COVID-19 have risen by about 240% in the U.S., underscoring the public health need for vaccination. These trial results provide a strong foundation for seeking authorization of our vaccine for children 5 to 11 years old. And we plan to submit them to the FDA and other regulators with urgency, Albert Bourla, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Pfizer, said in the statement. Dr. Scott Gottlieb, a former FDA commissioner and current Pfizer board member, has said a vaccine for children ages 5 to 11 could be available by Halloween. Acting FDA Commissioner Dr. Janet Woodcock and Dr. Peter Marks, director of FDA's Center for Biologics Research and Evaluation, said in a statement this month that the agency would review data for a vaccine for younger children as quickly as possible, likely in a matter of weeks rather than months, once it was submitted for authorization. However, the agency's ability to review these submissions rapidly will depend in part on the quality and timeliness of the submissions by manufacturers, they wrote. Calls for a COVID-19 vaccine for younger children have grown louder in recent months as cases surged among children. Coronavirus infections have risen exponentially among children across the United States, and now account for nearly 29% of all cases reported nationwide, the American Academy of Pediatrics reported last week. Still, U.S. health officials have emphasized that children are not just small adults, and even those approaching age 12 should not be given the larger vaccine dose available for older people. We don't want children to have adverse effects. Granted, we want them to be able to get vaccinated as quickly as possible. But let's do it right, FDA's Marks said in a fireside chat hosted by the Research America Alliance last week. There is a difference here because they're not just getting the same old dose as a 12 and up person will. They have to get a reduced dose. And that's why it's not a good idea for doctors to take things in their own hands at this point. LSU to require proof of vaccination or negative PCR test at Tiger Stadium. CNN, Louisiana State University announced Tuesday that it will require all guests at Tiger Stadium who are 12 and older to provide either proof of COVID-19 vaccination or a negative PCR test taken within 72 hours of entering the venue. The university cited the significant threat presented by COVID-19 across the state of Louisiana due to the highly transmissible Delta variant as the reason behind the latest requirements. As the flagship institution of the state of Louisiana, our foremost responsibility is to ensure the safety of our students, our supporters, and our community, LSU President William F. Tate IV said in a statement Tuesday. While we are aware of the diverse perspectives across the nation regarding masks and vaccinations, we must take all reasonable measures to protect our campus and community, not only on game days, but long after guests have left Tiger Stadium. The current threat to our lives, our health, and to our medical systems due to COVID-19 is overburdening our hospitals, and we must do our part to stop the spread. Louisiana Gov. John Bell Edwards tweeted his thanks to the university for helping keep fans safe in Tiger Stadium this year. You still have time to go get vaccinated before kickoff. The policy will be in effect beginning on September 11. LSU said a vaccination card, a photo or photocopy of a vaccination card, or verified digital proof of vaccination, including LA Wallet or another government-sanctioned mobile app, will be accepted as proof of vaccination status. The university will allow individuals inside who have only had one dose, the statement says. Search for Gabby Petratos' fiance Brian Laundrie focuses on Florida Nature Reserve, CNN. The search for the now-missing fiance of 22-year-old Gabby Petrato is focused on a Florida nature reserve, where 50 officers from 5 local agencies and FBI agents are scouring the area, according to Northport Police spokesperson Josh Taylor. During a Saturday news conference, Taylor said Laundrie has an enormous amount of pressure on him to provide answers following Petrato's own disappearance. Brian Laundrie's family told police Friday night they have not seen the 23-year-old since Tuesday. Police said at that time Laundrie is not wanted for a crime, and that authorities are working multiple missing person investigations. Northport police said on Twitter Saturday morning investigators were searching for laundry at the vast Carlton Reserve near Venice, Florida. Laundrie's family told police he left with his backpack Tuesday and told them he was going to the reserve, Taylor said Saturday. Police believe the vehicle he was driving may have been at the reserve too, but has since been returned to the Laundrie's home. When asked why Laundrie's family didn't tell police of his whereabouts until Friday, Taylor said, "That's a great question. You know, we've obviously been trying to reach the family to get answers in this case since last Saturday," Taylor said. "The first time that we've had any in-depth conversation with them was yesterday when their attorney called and said the family was concerned about Brian's whereabouts." Laundrie family attorney Stephen Bertolino said Friday that Laundrie's whereabouts are currently unknown. Richard Stafford, the attorney for the Petrato family, said in a brief statement sent to CNN, "All of Gabby's family want the world to know that Brian is not missing, he is hiding. Gabby is missing. Search for Petrato is now a week old. Law enforcement began investigating Petrato's disappearance on September 11. When Petrato's family reported her missing after they were unable to contact her for several days. Prior to her disappearance, Petrato had been traveling with Laundrie on a road trip through several western states. Laundrie returned to Northport without Petrato September 1, according to police. Officials later found the van the couple had been traveling in at the home Petrato shared with Laundrie and his parents in Northport. On Saturday, the FBI said the search for Petrato included ground surveys being conducted in Grand Teton National Park with the National Park Service, the Teton County Sheriff's Office and the Jackson, Wyoming Police. "This is an active and ongoing investigation, so we ask the public to maintain distance from any law enforcement personnel, equipment, vehicles, and their related activity for the safety of the public in these remote areas and to protect the integrity of our work," the FBI's Denver field office said in a tweet Saturday afternoon. In a statement issued to NBC before it was reported Laundrie's whereabouts were unknown. Family attorney Bertolino said Laundrie would not speak about the matter because intimate partners are often the first person law enforcement focuses their attention on in cases like this, and the warning that any statement made will be used against you is true. Regardless of whether my client had anything to do with Ms. Petrato's disappearance. Northport Police Chief Todd Garrison told CNN's Don Lemon earlier in the week that Laundrie had invoked his Fifth Amendment right, which generally means a person cannot be forced to make statements they feel might be negative or used against them. Taylor told CNN's Chris Cuomo Friday night Laundrie's disappearance is another twist in this story. Police previously visited the home but the family refused to talk and instead gave authorities the information for their attorney. Taylor said this week, Petrato's stepfather, "I don't know what to believe." Petrato's stepfather said Friday he is happy Laundrie's parents called police, but said, "I don't know what to believe." Jim Schmidt told CNN's Cuomo he was caught off guard by the news shared moments earlier that Laundrie's family spoke with authorities, saying he hadn't even had a moment to digest it. "All that matters is finding her and bringing her home," Schmidt said. "We're still trying to get the word out there and try to find that one person that might have some details that we need," Schmidt said. "Just trying to get out there and find that person and hopefully they can help us with anything that will bring her home." When asked if there was anything from the last few times he contacted Gabby that would be helpful now, Schmidt said, "I'm not sure. We've been analyzing everything as much as we can. And your mind races in a million different directions when you're trying to put something like this together, and we're still trying to get a full grasp on the entire situation." Schmidt asked for the media to just keep getting the word out, adding, "Some different photos, not just the ones that have been out there." Maybe that sparks something in the public that somebody didn't recognize before, and just keep getting that word out there and keep this fresh in the media so it keeps going until we find her. The FBI has released a new missing person poster asking for help in the search for Petrato. Campsite reviews appear to show the couple this summer before they vanished. Petrato and Laundrie appeared to have left reviews on an online camp community app called The Dirt. An account linked to the couple lists campgrounds in Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Washington, Wyoming, and Utah, as well as left reviews of campsites where Petrato was last seen. Camping spots to the Grand Teton National Park were saved on the profile. According to a timeline of events provided Friday by Petrato family attorney Stafford, Gabby FaceTimed with her mother on August 24, saying she was leaving Utah and headed to the Tetons. A photo of the couple was posted on The Dirt 2 months ago and tags their social media accounts. Their most recent review is about Arches National Park in Utah in July, in the same county where Moab police had an interaction with Petrato and Laundrie 2 weeks later. At the time, officers with the Moab City Police Department responded to reports of disorderly conduct involving Petrato and Laundrie, which ended with a report describing them as having engaged in some sort of altercation. The officers who responded to the incident suggested Laundrie and Petrato should separate for the night, according to the report, and no charges were filed. One of the officers who responded to the scene wrote in the police report Laundrie said the pair had been traveling together for the last 4 or 5 months. CNN's Paul P. Murphy, Kayleen Chassie, Christina Maxoris, Aya Ilamrusi, Andy Rose, Mi Son Lee and Deanna Hackney contributed to this report. Human remains found in Wyoming are consistent with description of Gabby Petrato, FBI says. CNN. Human remains discovered in Teton County, Wyoming, on Sunday are consistent with the description of missing 22-year-old Gabby Petrato, FBI officials said in a news conference. Full forensic identification has not been completed to confirm 100% that we found Gabby, but her family has been notified of this discovery, said Charles Jones, FBI Denver's supervisory senior resident agent in Wyoming. The cause of death has not been determined, he said. Teton County coroner Dr. Brent Blue told CNN an autopsy is scheduled for Tuesday, saying officials would confirm the identity through photographs, personal identification or DNA. Authorities this weekend conducted a search around the Spread Creek dispersed camping area in Bridger Teton National Forest on the eastern edge of Grand Teton National Park for any sign of Petrato, whose family reported her missing September 11. At the same time, authorities in Florida were looking for Petrato's fiance, Brian Laundrie. His family told police Friday they had not seen Laundrie since last Tuesday, prompting a search of a local nature reserve that has so far yielded no results. Prior to Petrato's disappearance, the couple had been traveling on a road trip through several western states. Laundrie returned to Northport, Florida, without Petrato on September 1, according to police. Officials later found the van the couple had been traveling in at the home Petrato shared with Laundrie and his parents in Northport, a city in Sarasota County some 80 miles south of Tampa. Laundrie is not wanted for a crime, officials have said. This weekend, dozens of officers and FBI agents combed an area that stretches out to roughly 25,000 acres, according to the Northport Police Department. But the search was suspended for a second time Sunday evening, police said on Twitter, adding, "Nothing to report." Laundrie's family told police he left home with his backpack Tuesday and told them he was going to the reserve, Northport police spokesperson Josh Taylor said Saturday. Police visited the Laundrie family home after Petrato was reported missing, But Laundrie's family refused to talk, Taylor said last week, and instead gave authorities the information for their attorney. The home was searched Friday evening after Laundrie's family told police they had not seen him for days. Laundrie family attorney Stephen Bertolino said Friday that Laundrie's whereabouts are currently unknown. But Richard Stafford, an attorney for the Petrato family, said in a brief statement to CNN, "All of Gabby's family want the world to know that Brian is not missing, he is hiding. Gabby is missing." FBI continues to ask for tips. Jones, the FBI agent, opened Sunday's news conference at Grand Teton National Park by extending condolences to Petrato's family. "As every parent can imagine, this is an incredibly difficult time for the family and friends," Jones said. "Our thoughts and prayers are with them. The campsite authorities searched this weekend will remain closed to the public," Jones said. "This is an active and ongoing investigation," the FBI said in a news release, "so we ask the public to maintain distance from any law enforcement personnel, equipment, vehicles, and their related activity for the safety of the public in these remote areas, to respect the privacy of Gabby's family, and to protect the integrity of our work. Officials are still asking for tips from anyone who might have seen Petrato, Laundrie, or their vehicle, a 2012 Ford Transit van with a Florida plate and stickers on the back, according to the FBI's missing person poster for Petrato. We continue to seek information from anyone who utilized the Spread Creek dispersed camping area between the dates of August 27 and August 30, Jones said. The public's response to officials' requests for tips has been remarkable, Jones said. Search for Laundrie focuses on vast nature reserve in a statement Sunday night, Bertolino, the Laundrie family attorney, said the news about Petrato is heartbreaking. The Laundrie family prays for Gabby and her family, the statement said. This weekend, federal and local authorities conducted their search for Laundrie in the vast Carlton Reserve in Sarasota County, Florida, police said. The search effort included the use of drones and bloodhounds who used articles of Laundrie's clothing taken from his home to get his scent, Taylor said in a news conference at the scene of the search Saturday. Police initially focused their search on a nearby park about 200 acres large before expanding to the rest of the reserve. And this photo provided by the Northport Police Department. Law enforcement officials conduct a search of the Carlton Reserve in the Sarasota, Florida, area for Brian Laundrie on Saturday. Police believe the vehicle Laundrie was driving may have been at the reserve, too, but has since been returned to the Laundrie's home, Taylor said. Laundrie has an enormous amount of pressure on him to provide answers to what's going on, Taylor said. Asked why Laundrie's family didn't tell police of his whereabouts until Friday, Taylor said. That's a great question. You know, we've obviously been trying to reach the family to get answers in this case since last Saturday, Taylor said. The first time that we've had any in-depth conversation with them was Friday, when their attorney called and said the family was concerned about Brian's whereabouts. Law enforcement has been characterizing the disappearances of Petrato and Laundrie as multiple missing person investigations, according to a statement Friday from Northport Police. CNN's Travis Caldwell, Andy Rose, Jen Selva, Alta Spells, Sean Nottingham, Christina Maxoris, Aya Lamrousi, Rob Frez, Mi Son Lee and Deanna Hackney contributed to this report. The U.S. death toll from COVID-19 just surpassed that of the 1918 flu pandemic, CNN, despite all the scientific and medical advances of the past 103 years. The COVID-19 pandemic has now killed more Americans than the 1918 flu pandemic did. More than 675,000 people in the United States have died from COVID-19, according to Johns Hopkins University. That surpasses the estimated U.S. death toll from the deadliest pandemic of the 20th century. If you would have talked to me in 2019, I would have said I'd be surprised, said epidemiologist Stephen Kissler of the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. But if you talked to me in probably April or May 2020, I would say I would not be surprised we'd hit this point. In April 2020, CNN published a list of lessons learned from the 1918 pandemic that could help mitigate the COVID-19 pandemic. They included not ditching safety precautions too early, not getting a false sense of security among those young and healthy, and not relying on unproven treatments. But Kissler said those lessons were not heeded by many. A lot of the mistakes that we definitely fell into in 1918, we hoped we wouldn't fall into in 2020, Kissler said. We did. Here's a look at some of the key differences and similarities between the 1918 pandemic flu and COVID-19. What's different between the two pandemics? The Oakland Municipal Auditorium in California was converted to a temporary hospital with volunteer nurses from the American Red Cross in 1918. Population. The U.S. population is now triple what it was in 1918. So while the COVID-19 death toll may be higher, the 1918 flu pandemic apparently killed a higher proportion of Americans, Kissler said. Vaccine availability. Back in 1918, there was no pandemic flu vaccine, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, said. How pandemic flu is different from seasonal flu now. COVID-19 vaccines are available, but millions of eligible Americans have not been vaccinated. In the United States, COVID-19 vaccines started rolling out to certain groups in mid-December 2020, 9 months after the World Health Organization declared the coronavirus outbreak a pandemic. By that time, more than 298,000 Americans had already died from COVID-19, according to Johns Hopkins data. Fast forward to Monday, and 36% of Americans ages 12 and older have not yet been fully vaccinated amid this Delta variant surge, according to CDC data. The rapid spread of misinformation. Kissler said he believes the biggest disadvantage now compared to the 1918 pandemic actually involves a major technological advance. The Internet can be a double-edged sword, he said. It provides us with the opportunity to receive the CDC and the World Health Organization updates, and to share information much more quickly. But that also means we can spread misinformation quickly as well. For months, doctors have been trying to debunk popular myths shared on social media, saying they're actually jeopardizing public health and holding the country back. What's similar between the two pandemics? Young people aren't invincible. Just because a person is young and healthy doesn't mean they can't be hit hard by a pandemic virus. With the 1918 flu pandemic, the high mortality in healthy people, including those in the 20 to 40-year age group, was a unique feature of this pandemic, the CDC said. About two-thirds of the deaths from the 1918 pandemic were among people ages 18 to 50. Said John Barry, author of the 2004 book, The Great Influenza: The Story of the Deadliest Pandemic in History. And the peak age for death was 28, Barry told CNN last year. It might not be surprising that the pandemic flu spread rapidly among young adults in 1918. That was the final year of World War I. And many young soldiers were close together in barracks. While there's no World War now, COVID-19 has proven young people can still be hit hard, even if their risk of death is much lower. We have absolutely seen, especially with long COVID, that young people are far from invincible, Kissler said. Personal responsibility matters. No matter how good the science and public health advice are, Those things are only as good as the behavioral response, Kistler said. During the 1918 flu pandemic, when cases had dropped in San Francisco, the city father said, "Let's open up the city. Let's have a great big parade downtown. We'll all take off our masks together." Epidemiologist Drive. Larry Brilliant said. 2 months later, because of that event, the great influenza came back again roaring. On the other side of the United States, Philadelphia suffered a similar fate. Even though 600 sailors from the Philadelphia Navy Yard had the virus in September 1918, the city didn't cancel a parade scheduled for September 28, 1918. 3 days later, Philadelphia had 635 new cases of the flu, according to the University of Pennsylvania Archives and Record Center. Quickly, Philadelphia became the city with the highest influenza death toll in the U.S., Penn Research states. By contrast, St. Louis, which scheduled a similar parade but canceled it, fared much better. The next month, more than 10,000 people in Philadelphia died from pandemic flu, while the death toll in St. Louis did not rise above 700, the CDC said. Now, in mid-2021, almost every new COVID-19 death could have been prevented through vaccination, the CDC director said. The In America, Remember, public art installation in Washington, D.C. commemorates all Americans who have died from COVID-19. On September 18, more than 660,000 small plastic flags were at the site, some with personal messages to those who died. It's possible the viruses can spread long after the pandemic. The World Health Organization defines a pandemic as the worldwide spread of a new disease. But there's no precise measurement for when a pandemic is over. While the CDC said the 1918 pandemic happened in 3 waves, from the spring of 1918 to the summer of 1919. The virus kept circulating seasonally for 38 years. Kistler said he believes SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, might also stick around for years, even if the pandemic is over. We'll get new variants, including some that might cause reinfection, Kistler predicted. But eventually, I do think those variants will be closely enough related, probably, to the things we've already been vaccinated against or the things we've already been exposed to that it won't cause the same sort of severe disease. He stressed the best way to gain protection and help this pandemic sputter out is to get vaccinated, not wait for exposure to the virus, which could lead to long COVID, hospitalization or death. Essentially, what the vaccine does is it gives you your first and second exposure for free, without the dangers of COVID-19, Kistler said. That's extremely helpful, and that goes a long way to reducing mortality. CNN's Jacqueline Howard contributed to this report. SpaceX capsule returns 4 civilians from orbit. Capping off first tourism mission New York. CNN Business. 4 people returned to Earth from a 3-day extraterrestrial excursion aboard a SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule on Saturday evening, marking the end of the first-ever flight to Earth's orbit flown entirely by tourists or otherwise non-astronauts. Thanks so much SpaceX. It was a heck of a ride for us, billionaire and Inspiration 4 Inches mission commander Jared Isaacman could be heard saying over the company's live stream. The crew were shown watching movies and occasionally heard responding to SpaceX's mission control inside their fully autonomous spacecraft before it began the nail-biting process of re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. After traveling at more than 17,000 miles per hour, the spacecraft used Earth's own thick blanket of air to slow itself down. with the outside of the craft reaching temperatures up to 3,500 Fahrenheit in the process. The Crew Dragon capsule, which is designed not to allow temperatures to go past 85 in the cabin, used its heat shield to protect the crew against the intense heat and buildup of plasma as it plunged back toward the ocean after emerging from the spacecraft. Just before being whisked back to Florida by helicopter, the crew were seen smiling and waving to the live stream cameras. But the flight was apparently not totally flawless from a technical standpoint. "You know, we had a couple of issues that we worked. We did work something on the waste management system," Benji Reed, SpaceX's Director of Crew Mission Management, said during a post-flight briefing. "But that was fine, and you know, the crew was happy and healthy," he added. Inspiration 4 mission director Todd Erickson clarified that the issues was with the waste management system's fan. The SpaceX team responded by implementing a backup plan. "My hat's off to them," Erickson added. Reed also said that there was an issue with a temperature sensor in one of the Draco thrusters used to move the capsule in outer space. But the company responded by taking the double redundant sensor offline. And in fact that Draco itself was redundant. It was never a risk, Reed said. NASA officials have, however, said the Crew Dragon is likely the safest crewed vehicle ever flown. And the vehicle had already completed 2 successful trips to space with professional astronauts on board before this group of space tourists took their multi-day joyride. The passengers included the 38-year-old Isaacman, who personally financed and arranged the trip with SpaceX and its CEO, Elon Musk; Haley Arsenault, 29, a childhood cancer survivor and St. Jude Children's Research Hospital physician assistant; Sean Procotor, 51, a geologist and community college teacher with a Ph.D., and Chris Sembrowski, a 42-year-old Lockheed Martin employee and lifelong space fan who claimed his seat through an online raffle. Isaacman has billed the mission as a St. Jude fundraiser, and it had netted $160 million of its $200 million goal by Saturday evening. "Count me in for $50 million, Musk then pledged in a tweet, which would put the fundraiser $10 million over its goal. Though they're not the first tourists to travel to orbit, their mission, called Inspiration 4, was notable because it did not involve a stay at the International Space Station under the tutelage of professional astronauts, as previous missions involving space tourists have. Rather, the 4 spaceflight novices have spent the past 3 days free flying aboard their 13-foot wide capsule on their own at about a 350-mile altitude, 100 miles higher than where the ISS is, and higher than any human has flown in decades, during their stay in space. The civilians on board said they'd conduct a bit of scientific research focused on how their bodies respond to being in space, take time to chat with their families, gaze out a large dome-shaped window called the cupola, and listen to music. During a live stream shared with the public on Friday, Proctor also showed off some artwork she did during her stay with metallic markers, and Sembrowski strummed a ukulele that will be auctioned off as part of the St. Jude fundraiser. The Inspiration4 Twitter account also shared footage of Arsenault speaking to her St. Jude patients. And Isaacman rang the closing bell of the New York Stock Exchange via satellite feed on Friday afternoon. Other than that, few updates were shared with the public while the crew was in orbit. The first live audio or visuals from inside the crew capsule were shared Friday afternoon, nearly 2 days after they launched. During previous SpaceX Crew Dragon missions, all of which have been flown for NASA and carried professional astronauts to the International Space Station, the public has had more insight. The space agency and its dozens of communications personnel have worked alongside SpaceX to share practically every moment of the journey from launch until the astronauts dock with the International Space Station. But this mission left the public largely in the dark when it came to questions about the crew's schedule and how they were feeling while in orbit. Even though development of the Crew Dragon spacecraft was largely funded by taxpayers and SpaceX rents NASA facilities to support all its missions, Inspiration4 is considered a private commercial mission. That means SpaceX's customers only have to be as transparent as they want to be. There could be several reasons why the space tourists were publicity shy during their trip. It is possible, for example, that the crew wasn't feeling all that great after first reaching orbit. According to a NASA research paper, many astronauts report motion sickness symptoms just after arrival in space and again just after return to Earth, and getting a restful night's sleep in orbit was also a serious challenge for many crew members aboard shuttle missions. It's also possible the 4 novice space explorers wanted their privacy or simply to enjoy the experience without having to stop to talk about it. But favorable reviews of their experience could be crucial. SpaceX hopes that this mission will be the first of many like it, building up a new line of business for the company in which it uses Crew Dragon to fly commercial missions with tourists or private researchers rather than just professional astronauts. SpaceX already has contracts for 5 other private missions, as well as at least 4 additional NASA-contracted missions. The Supreme Court gave Trump leeway on executive actions. Biden wants the same treatment. CNN. The Biden administration faces 2 major confrontations with the Supreme Court this week, as the justices weigh requests related to the COVID moratorium on evictions and the termination of a Trump practice that forced migrants seeking U.S. asylum to stay in Mexico until their claims could be heard. Late Tuesday night, it lost the latter, as a divided court refused a Biden request to lift a lower court order that requires the new administration to revive former President Donald Trump's "Remain in Mexico" policy for asylum seekers, dividing along familiar ideological lines. The justices denied President Joe Biden the regard that Trump's immigration policies regularly received. The case offers an early window into emerging conflicts between the conservative court under Chief Justice John Roberts and the Democratic Biden administration. The 3 liberal justices, Stephen Breyer, Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan, said in the Tuesday night order that they would have granted the Biden request. The overriding question in the asylum case and the pending dispute over the eviction moratorium, as well as other controversies on the horizon, is how much deference the 6-3 conservative liberal court majority will afford the current president. Republican-led states and conservative organizations have been challenging a swath of Biden policies. Such disputes over immigration, the environment, and tax and economic policy could become a staple of the Supreme Court's docket. During Trump's presidency, the court blocked lower court orders against immigration and asylum restrictions and Trump's diversion of federal funds to build a wall at the border with Mexico. Biden Justice Department lawyers want the same deference to the executive branch that Trump enjoyed in recent years. This court has repeatedly stayed broad lower court injunctions against executive branch policies addressing matters of immigration, foreign policy, and migration management. It should do the same here. Acting U.S. Solicitor General Brian Fletcher wrote as he urged the justices to suspend the lower court order that would force Biden to reinstate Trump's "Remain in Mexico" practice. The second pending case, arising from a lawsuit by landlords, sets up a separate face-off with the Biden Justice Department because it arguably flouts a June 29 court order and concurrence from Justice Brett Kavanaugh signaling the conservative majority believes a pandemic-related eviction moratorium may be imposed only by Congress. Related. What the Supreme Court and lower courts have, and have not, said about the eviction moratorium. The new U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention eviction moratorium, to protect renters facing economic hardship and at risk of spreading the virus if forced to move, would run until October 3. It covers fewer counties than the first but still applies to much of the U.S., places with high levels of virus transmission. Fletcher emphasized in his filing Monday backing the new moratorium that a surge in COVID cases since late June caused by the Delta variant necessitated executive action. The trajectory of the pandemic has since changed, unexpectedly, dramatically, and for the worse, Fletcher wrote, noting that as of August 19, the 7-day average of daily new cases was 130,926. Nearly a tenfold increase over the rate when the Supreme Court first acted in the dispute known as Alabama Association of Realtors versus Department of Health and Human Services. Fletcher again cited the deference the Supreme Court has given in the past to public health experts in addressing the many emergency applications that have arisen out of the present pandemic. The court and individual justices have often recognized that they should respect the judgments of policymakers charged with protecting the public health, he wrote. Through the 4 years of Trump litigation, the Republican-appointed conservative justices and Democratic-appointed liberal justices routinely divided in emergency cases testing whether a policy could be enforced while the merits of a dispute wended through lower courts, led by Roberts. The conservative majority routinely prevailed and contested Trump policies were enforced, over orders from lower court judges attempting to block the new administration practices. Last January, for example, just before Trump left office, the court dissolved a lower court injunction in an abortion drug controversy and reinstated a Trump administration rule that women prescribed mifepristone to end a pregnancy in its early weeks, obtain the pill in person notwithstanding pandemic concerns. Sotomayor, currently the most liberal justice, decried the conservative majority's pattern in a 2020 case. It is hard to say what is more troubling, Sotomayor wrote in a dispute over a tougher policy for green card applicants needing public assistance that lower court judges had tried to halt. That the government would seek this extraordinary relief seemingly as a matter of course, or that the court would grant it. Roberts, who loathes attention on the court's political divisions, has tried to dilute the trend that appears to favor Republican initiatives, including by voting on rare occasion with the left or triggering a succession of ideologically mixed actions within a case or series of cases. Yet Tuesday night's order in the "Remain in Mexico" asylum case, refusing Biden the deference that Trump often received, split the justices along the usual right and left lines. Why this week's SCOTUS actions matter. These pending disputes over the revised migrant practice, brought by Texas, and the eviction moratorium, brought by landlords, come as the Biden administration will soon experience its first full term at the Supreme Court. In the Supreme Court session that ended in June, the Biden administration abandoned previously filed Trump arguments and switched the government's position in several cases, The High Court majority generally adopted Trump arguments over those advanced by the Biden team, including as the justices sided with challengers to two separate California laws, allowing union organizing on agricultural land and requiring charitable organizations to disclose major contributors. The court also rejected Biden arguments that low-level crack cocaine offenders were eligible for reduced sentences under the First Step Act. The federal government is represented at the High Court by the U.S. Solicitor General. Biden recently nominated Elizabeth Prelogar to the post. A former assistant solicitor general and a counsel on Robert Mueller's Russia investigation, Prelogar served as the acting U.S. Solicitor General earlier this year. In the 2021-22 session, which begins in October, the Office of the SG, as it is known, will shepherd the Biden legal agenda on multiple pending cases, including over fundamental abortion rights and gun control regulation under the Second Amendment. The justices have separately asked for the administration's views of Harvard's admissions practices that include consideration of applicants' races, currently being challenged by a group that says Harvard is violating federal law and disadvantaging Asian American students. All indications are that Biden's legal team will back Harvard, the opposite stance of the Trump administration. And when the time comes later this fall for Biden lawyers to weigh in regarding abortion rights and gun control, they are certain to reverse the Trump pattern of opposition on those issues. How that might alter the course of the Roberts Court conservatism, or make barely a difference, will be seen during the 2021-22 session, through next summer. This story has been updated with further developments Tuesday.